Uh,
Let me
I
reload
just did
this.
that wrong.
No worries.
That's what
Let
I get
me
for trying to adjust.
let me reload this and make sure that we're live. And it looks like we are. So, uh, we are all ready to go. This talk is one that is quite personally interesting for me: how to translate technical risk for management understanding, by our speaker Linda Montgomery. I'll, as with previous talks, I'll be watching the track one chat in case there are questions. So if you have questions for our speaker, please share them in there, and I'll queue them all up at the end for our Q&A period. So, Linda, whenever you're ready.
Okay, well, thank you. And hello, besides. I would encourage you to ask questions because I just as soon answer whatever it is that is on your mind. I titled this How to Translate Technical Risk for Management, but it's also subtitled How to Talk to the C-Suite. And if you haven't heard that term before, that means the CEO, the CIO, the CFO, the CLO, all the people that are the head of your organization. Um, so, since I've practiced law for over 25 years, I was the CLO. So I was also the corporate board secretary. So I got to sit in all of these meetings and be able to see who hits it out of the park and who leaves. And the people look at each other after the presentation. They go, "What was that?" So since all those people in the C-suite ultimately decide who gets the money, who gets priority, it's important to be able to talk to them well. So I thought I'd just start with very basics of understand who you're talking to and how do you talk to them and what is it that they're most interested in doing. So the first thing is put your presentation or your discussion into context. Uh, it is not silly to say, what is the purpose of this presentation? And what action do I want from you as the decision makers, even if the only thing you want to do is inform them and have them understand. Uh, these people are used to getting a lot of information very quickly, and so they want to make sure that they understand the context first so that they're listening for what they need to be doing. The other thing is that you have to give them information in a way that it can be compared to other kinds of risk. Their whole job is to filter risk and balance risk. Cost benefit, which is the next one, is their business. But they're not going to be an expert on cyber risk or risk from the outside or the risk of upgrading or not upgrading. So you need to be able to translate it for them into, okay, is it more important to be upgrading our software, or is it more important to be investing in employee benefits, or is it more important to be investing in a new product, or do I really need to be doing some better advertising so our reputation gets better? So they're balancing all of those different kinds of risks. So you need to give it to them in a way that they can digest it and that they can figure it out. They're always looking at cost versus benefit. So you need to give them the bottom line first. They don't want a build up to the results. They want to know what the results are and then have you justify it. So always give them the answer first. Their job is to prioritize. So you don't need to educate them on all of the intricacies of firewalls and servers and software and attack vectors and risk profiles within cyber. You need to give them just enough information so that they can make an informed risk decision at the very highest level. And if they want more information, they're really good at asking for it. So try to summarize it, try to translate it, and try to give them a sufficient amount so that they understand what you're asking. I also strongly recommend pictures. Use graphics. You can pack in more information. You can be much more effective. And if you're thinking in pictures, it forces you to translate your message into something that's visual. One of the problems we have, and every technical job has it, is that we talk in shorthand. So we talk in jargon. And so, you know, I could give you legal jargon so your eyes would cross. Not effective way to communicate. So keep trying to translate it into very basic stuff. And one of the ways is to do pictures. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples. So this is a risk matrix that pretty much everybody has probably seen, but your probability and likelihood versus the consequences. And I strongly recommend putting your discussion into this kind of context, because they're going to see this kind of risk matrix for all sorts of risks. And so then it gives them a common basis to compare across. Here's another graphic of why is this important? And, you know, if I'm somebody who's worried about the bottom line of the company, knowing that the average total cost of a data breach is almost $4 million kind of grabs my attention. And then here's another type of graphic. And I don't really have to understand everything that goes into that, other than the more records lost, the more it costs. And that has been a consistent result over the last 4 years. So look at how long it took me to just say that versus being able to show it to you. So think about it in pictures. Okay, so we're going to be talking about risks and translating cyber risk into common types of risk. And so pretty much into these different categories. The first is your impact to business. And this is disruption of the business. You know, we had a denial of service attack, and so we can't get our business done. The cost of recovery, the cost of loss of property, and whether that's actual property, whether that's burning up a critical infrastructure, or whether that's loss of intellectual property, doesn't matter, loss of property, and the impact on stock. Remember, at the bottom line, if you're a publicly traded company, you're ultimately accountable to stockholders. And so whether your stock goes up or down makes a big difference on your personal performance, but also the performance of the company. And so that's a risk that they're paying a lot of attention to. Impact to reputation. So it's consumer and customer confidence. So that's your direct consumers, but it's also stakeholder confidence, regulator confidence, your vendors and people you do business with for suppliers. So anytime I'm looking to enter into a contract with another company, I'm evaluating how much risk there is. And if there's more risk, I'm going to charge more, because companies always translate risk into money. So there's a compliance risk, and this also translates into money, because it's fines and penalties, it's possible sanctions up to and including preventing you from even doing work. So particularly if you're a government contractor, they can debar you from doing any sort of government work. And since the government is the single largest purchaser in the United States, that's a big deal. There's compliance costs that can be charged as required remediation, and that's different than just the recovery costs that are your personal costs. But it may be that they ask you to go ahead and pay for credit monitoring for information that has been lost, or other types of remediation. So those are costs. And then there's possible ongoing oversight costs. And let me tell you, if you have a regulator that's coming in and doing long-term oversight under a consent order, huge amount of cost, disruption to business, reputation, all of those. So oftentimes you have an issue that will hit risk in multiple areas. And then the final one, the one where I've lived most of my corporate life, is liability costs. And that is the cost of litigation. Even if you're right, but if you have to defend against lawsuits, that costs you money. I used to tell people that if we're litigating, we've already lost. We're just deciding how much and which one's going to lose more, because you want to avoid litigation, because defense costs can be easily $1 million. And so just proving that you're right or proving that you were okay costs a lot of money. There's the cost of the liability itself. And so if you lose the lawsuit or you decide to settle, because sometimes settlements are a lot cheaper than the defense, or paying the damages, you actually caused harm to another and you need to compensate them. So that cost of liability. And as I said, possible remediation costs, so that may come out of the lawsuit. There may be some additional punitive types of remediation that they want you to do. So things that you may not have done previously. So I list these because you can always translate what you're thinking about into these kinds of categories. And then if you get it into a category, you may or may not be able to go back to the risk matrix and say, how much money, or how much time, or how much impact, and then what is the likelihood? One of the things about cyber is that it is a high consequence, lower probability, but there's value in talking to your C-suite ahead of time to say, well, it's not a zero probability. When we define low likelihood, that's not will somebody try, that's how far do they get in. And that's a really important mindset, because if you think about safety risks, originally safety risks, we said, you don't have accidents. Well, that's not realistic. So what we want to say is we have accidents, but we don't have bad injuries or consequences from the accidents. But there are other types of things where you just don't want it to ever happen. And so getting the context of this, what is to be expected versus when is it a really bad, and what kind of investment do we have to make to prevent the really bad, but possibly accept and recover from the attempts, but not the really, really bad. Okay, so I wanted to give you a couple of final presentation hints that if you're going up to do one of these presentations to the C-suite or to senior management, number one, you got to get organized and you need to put it together. And so walking in just thinking that you're knowledgeable means that you're not going to be very effective, because you haven't thought it through, you haven't organized it, and you haven't gotten it down to the time limit that they're going to be giving you to really make your case. So do a fresh eyes review. And I say that because I want you to put it together and then have somebody who hasn't been involved with it at all to look at it, because generally they will ask you a question or identify a gap that you didn't even think about. So do a quick review. It is worthwhile to practice some. Sometimes, yes, when you think about it in your head, it sounds perfectly good, but when it comes out of your mouth, it sounds terrible. Or that you realize as you go through it that you want to change the order in which you want to present this so that you're more effective in getting that bottom line information out. I know people get very nervous talking to management because management does have a fair amount of power. But remember, you are the expert. and they want to understand what you have to say. You know, so think about it that way. I have something of great value that I need to get to these people to help them do their job, not thinking about what happens if they don't like me. They're there to do a job. You're helping them do their job. You are the expert. So don't get intimidated and don't get scared. They're just people too, and they're just trying to do their job. It's important to present and continue as you answer questions to focus on what do they need to know? What do they need to know to make a decision? What do they need to know to be prepared? What do they need to know to balance with other competing risks? What do they need to know in being able to talk to stakeholders? Employees, what do they need to know, and try to give that to them. We talked a little bit earlier today about getting into the mindset of the hacker. Well, this is just a very similar type of process. Get into the mindset of the decision maker. What is it that they need to know? And then give it to them so that you can be most persuasive. Frame the reality. Don't sugarcoat it, and don't try to tell them what you think they want to hear. If it's bad news, okay, it's bad news. They'd rather hear that it's bad news and then figure out how bad, or they'd like to know whether there's a variety of options available. Whatever the reality is, these tend to be no-nonsense people that have to deal with problems all the time. And so giving it to them in a way that they can process it and have usable information is the very best thing you can do. Most companies, not all, but most good companies value someone who can say truth to power. And you need to say it clearly with enough content for them to make a decision. And more importantly, if they make a decision and it isn't what you recommended or isn't what you think is right, that you still accept the decision. And one of the ways to think about that is that you always need to realize that they're balancing multiple risks. And you may not know all of the things that go into that. I kind of think about it, it's a little bit like you and saying, I have $10. Is it better to spend the $10 patching the roof, repairing the car, or putting it away for retirement? I don't know the answer to that, and the answer changes through time. Same thing for the executives of the company. They have a limited amount of time, a limited amount of resources. And so they have to make the decision is what's the best choice now? And so you're trying to give them that information as clearly as possible, but there may be things you don't know about. So accepting the decision. The last thing I wanted to mention is the flip side of that. What if they get the decision wrong? And they're people, and they could get the decision wrong. And in fact, there's some pretty famous cyber cases of very large dollars where the cyber people told them it was an issue and the senior management just either didn't understand or didn't take it seriously or ignored it and wanted to get the short-term product out and therefore the short-term win. And they gambled, and they gambled incorrectly. So what if your senior management just got the decision wrong and you feel pretty strongly about it? What do? Well, number one, you document just factually, not with editorial, not with how you're feeling, but just the facts on what you presented, what you recommended, and what the decision was. And then you file it away, just in case it might be needed for later. And when I say needed for later, that may be a year from now, and they say, why didn't you tell me? And you can pull it out and say, I did, here it is. Or it may be they want to blame you if things go really, really wrong, and it acts as a shield for you. Or it may be that the regulators are coming in and they want to hold the right, correct people accountable, and regulators will go up the chain. And so if you have told them and they decided not, and you have documented that and you can prove it, then you have just protected yourself the best way you possibly can. So that's the end of my time. I have like about, I think, 10 minutes if there are questions. I can't hear you, Mav.
That would be why. I actually remembered to press the mute button on the front of my microphone.
There you go.
Forgot to press it again. So, I don't see any questions waiting for us in the channel. At least not currently.
We may be fast.
Yeah, we might be. That's okay. I haven't seen anybody start typing, so I'm going to assume that there aren't any questions that we need to answer right now. Hold on. As soon as I say that, someone starts typing.
It always happens.
Oh, wait just a second here.
Okay. Well, I am an attorney. I could keep talking if you all want, but that's my secret power.
Yeah. Okay. Here's the question. First off, thank you. And have you had any experience where Discovery comes in and performs an investigation? And if so, what were the biggest lessons that you learned other than, just keep good documentation?
Let me answer the question two ways. I certainly have not necessarily, most of my legal discovery has been not in the cyber area, it's in other areas. Mm-hmm. It works exactly the same way. So from a litigation perspective, a lot of people, they watch legal shows on television, and I can tell you it doesn't work like that. Unless it has a special privilege, and that's very, very limited. So like talking to your attorney and advice you get from your attorney is privileged. You should just assume that everything that is ever produced, ever said, ever printed, ever available is going to be turned over to the other side in a lawsuit. So during discovery, you are obligated to turn it over. And if you don't, if you either lose it, destroy it, or don't share it, there are severe sanctions on company and the people involved. So first, if it's available to be turned over, including chat recordings, anything you can think of, it needs to be turned over. And so that's part of the reason why litigation itself is so expensive, because you're paying attorneys to wade through all that material. I can tell you, not as an attorney, but as a member of the company, we did have a recent cyber attack, and it has and did not get very far in. It was an attack on our DMZ. We did not find serious loss of data, and yet it is still taken about 6 weeks to recover.
Yeah.
So it's costly even just in the time to work your way through that. And we brought in probably 4 different other organizations to help us, including bringing in Mandiant on a contract to help. And that's not cheap either. And so the best thing you can do is avoid these, but the faster and more thorough you can be, and therefore really the important part is well organized, the lower the cost is.
Okay. That's a very A very important observation.
Well, I try to be practical as opposed to giving you legal advice.
I don't think we have anything else for you, but thank you very much for your time. It
Okay.
was a really interesting talk. Yeah.
I'm sure you say that to everybody.
Today I actually do. We've had a
Yeah.
really great roster today.
Well, B-Sides has been awesome. So I'm glad to be a part of it.
So our upcoming thing right now actually is a break,
Okay.
which is not a thing that we've had so far. So,
Okay.
so
Thank you very much.
yes, thank you very much too. We're gonna take a few minutes away, and then we will be back here with the How to Get Started in Cybersecurity panel. So, thank you very much.
See you later.